We're the two Pilates Chicks. We don't know what our theme music is, but we just love being entertained by whatever it is every time.
Whatever happens.
Whatever happens. It is season 5, episode 10. We're in the double digits for the season. And we're talking about building the session for your client.
Pilates class planning.
Yes. And we're gearing it more towards the private.
Yeah.
Because it's so different when you're teaching for a class and planning for a class. It's a whole different ball game.
Yeah.
So we're kind of gearing it more that way, but we might touch on it a little bit maybe. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's funny because I just did a workshop on this for my students and then those that want to come in. And it's fascinating when people think, oh, you have to like be here and it has to do this and this and this. So we kind of wanted to like delve into it a bit.
Yeah.
Where to start?
Well, there's lots of different approaches and different goals to take on for planning a class. But
we should say planning a session.
Planning a session,
It's class, then we're going to think class.
Yeah.
Group.
I mean, and so we were thinking for a group class, we'll just quickly touch on that. We figure, well, you're creating a class for a bunch of different people. You may or may not know them. You're going in for some specified type of class that's on the schedule.
Yeah, maybe it's an intermediate or advanced or
booty
bar or whatever.
And people are there to work out, and you're giving a certain flow and a sequence, and it is what it is, and it's fun. And
it's fun.
And
you just want to keep people safe
and fun. And that's a group class. But with a private, it can get so much more nitpicky and important because you're working with this individual. You maybe are working with them for a long time. You're growing together. You're exploring the practice together. And you want to keep them safe and keep them moving. And
keep them challenged and keep them growing. And you're also building a relationship in terms of sharing this journey of Pilates and movement and maybe working through an injury or whatever it is.
Yep.
And them understanding. So we kind of thought we'd talk about that first time client, the one who first comes in. And it can be the one that, let's start on that's never done Pilates before.
Yeah, brand new.
They have no idea. They look at the equipment and they're like, oh, what is that? So we need to, I'm going all over the map here. Because then it's like the one where you're like, oh, they have to understand how to be like in this position, right? Like,
right.
You just can't get into that with a first time client.
Yeah.
In terms of, it has to look like this.
Yeah, we're gonna get stuck in a rut if we take a first-time client and say they have to look a certain way, they have to breathe a certain way, they have to move a certain way before we can let them do
things. Have to be like this, their legs, their arms, and And you're also inhibiting their movement and seeing them move.
So, I mean, in order to start working with the first-time client, you have to let them start moving so we can get to know them. They can get to know the movement, the choreography, the equipment.
Yep.
There's no other way to do it. You have to just start moving.
And I don't remember where I saw this or who said this, but it's like Pilates is messy. It looks sloppy when someone first starts, right?
Yeah.
It's like they're all over the mat. There's these springs and this is going.
Coordination.
So, but I like what you said because I was talking about before when we were talking. It's like they're learning choreography and they're learning a movement that maybe they've never done before.
Yeah.
In terms of what their body is, being asked to do. So, for us to jump in right away and say, "Oh no, we got to do this and this," we're kind of taking that learning for them away of the choreography and learning what the spring is saying to them.
Yeah, and we're essentially making the studio, the space, like a negative zone for them instead
like a
of
judgment zone.
Judgment, and instead of just letting them come in and experience it a bit, start to explore it, start to get familiar with some of the movement and the style.
And build some confidence for themselves.
Yeah, because then I don't want to go back somewhere if I'm being told no. Like
No. Stop.
So that's also an important thing. Like to maintain clientele, you want to be connecting with what that person needs, speaking to what they need. So if they're coming in and we're being super judgmental and keeping them from moving, they came to move.
It's unfriendly too.
Yeah. So are they going to want to come back after that? Probably not.
Probably not.
So in a session with that first time client, we really don't want to focus too much on corrections. Yes, you want to keep them safe. You want to get them in the proper position. You want to explain the choreography.
Yeah.
But we're not expecting them to look a certain way. We don't need them to be perfect in the movement or the coordination or the flow.
No.
Just be moving.
Yeah. And a lot of times they don't understand what you're asking. I mean, imagine, just remember the first time you ever taught horseback to somebody, meaning they're the first time client. They've never done it before. It's understanding a lot for them. They've got what? They're on a box. Yeah. It's like, and another thing is like, do you need to teach that exercise to, like you said, that person? Yeah. Because maybe they're not at that point where that's going to be something that's going to make them feel like, oh yeah, this is, I can feel, I can understand. So also understanding where they are in their movement.
Very much.
And understanding of choreography.
Yeah. I mean, in every session, whether it's a new client who's never done Pilates, a new client to us, or a longtime client, I mean, every session's based on that person.
In that moment.
In that day. So it's always based on, like, what their specific goals are, their needs, their injury history, their how they seem that day.
Yeah. Well, like today I had a client, I'll call her out, Hiroko. She's lovely. And she came in, and she'd missed 1 week. But it was like a new client where I would tell her something. She'd be like, wait, what?
Sometimes 1 week's a long time.
Well, it's not even that. What it is she's leaving with her family, 2 little boys, to go to Japan for all of July. And they leave on Sunday. So her head was gone. Yeah. It was gone. So I had to adjust to today for her and just get her to like be in it and clear her brain and center. And even though she had a lot of stuff in her body going on, that wasn't my priority. Yeah. And so we've got to, like, figure out what is it they're needing today. Yeah. And it was like, oh, her brain is not here today.
Well, and similarly, like, a couple weeks ago when my brain was like, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, yeah.
And, like, you had me do all these things that took so much concentration.
I gave you so much hard stuff.
Yeah, you're like, let's focus. So you literally can't think about anything but right
this.
Here.
Yeah.
And so that really does dictate what to give a person based on how they are coming in.
Exactly, where they are. And I think the other thing is sometimes asking them. Like, I love to be halfway into a session and say, what do you feel your body needs today? Because they have an answer. Yeah. And it's usually like, I'm feeling really tight here. Oh, I just feel like my brain is not. I mean, they're going to give you something like, well, we're going that route. And then you can just kind of figure out from there. But yeah, it's listening to that client.
Definitely listening. And that's the part where I think we forget as teachers that it's not always or ever really about us.
No, it's not ever. It's never.
It's not about us. It's about what that person needs and where they're going that day. And I think we forget that, and then people want to find all these fancy exercises, all these new things to give people because they're trying to keep people maybe entertained. They're trying to show that they themselves as a teacher know all this stuff.
Or they're scared their client's going to get bored.
Right. So people want to plan these sessions with like all of these ideas and all this stuff. But you might not need that.
Another thing, you and I were talking about it, and I talked about a lot with my students in the teacher training, is that the client's coming to you once, maybe twice a week. So they're only doing Reformer and Cadillac and the 100 and all this once a week. Yeah. And so they're not bored.
Right.
And they're not going to, if you keep throwing new things at them all the time, they're not going to get that muscle memory. They're not going to get more deeper into the work because it's all just different every time they come in.
It's not building.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, like in a lot of practices, and Pilates is a practice. So in practices, you need the repetition.
Like you were talking about with ballet.
Yeah. I mean, in ballet, you start with your plies, you go to your tendus, you do it every time, and you always do that. Then when you finish your bar, you go to center, you do the same thing, your plies and your tendus. And it's always going to be that. There's maybe some different variations within it, but you're doing those repetitive movements. You're getting it in the body. And I think people forget that. Repetition's okay.
Yeah, and repetition gives that mind body in terms of the body going, oh, I know what I'm doing. I don't have to think about this. I know what I'm doing. And then the mind can go deeper into the work in a newer way, where when it's learning choreography, it isn't able to do.
Can't as much. Yeah. Yeah, because you're kind of stuck on more of a surface level movement when you're learning the choreography.
Exactly.
You're just trying to find...
Like, my arm's where? I'm holding what? Yeah. What's happening? Yeah.
Where's my foot supposed to go? And that, again, is the same with dance, because once you get the choreography in your body, you kind of stop thinking and your body takes over, and then you can get a deeper level of that movement for your performance. And so same thing in here in the studio.
Yeah.
And so you learn those new connections, you learn how to do something in a different way, even though you're still doing that same thing.
Yeah. And I think that's important when we talk about building the client session is that they are like having that foundation every time they come in terms of they've done this before, they know the choreo, and then maybe adding in whatever you see needs to happen in terms of maybe they get a new exercise that, that's like a little more whatever. Or when there's so many exercises, obviously they're going to do something new every time anyway. Yeah. Because it's just, once you get on the wonder chair and the Cadillac and the barrels and
and it's like, especially with the traditional choreography, it's like it might be a new exercise for that person if they haven't done that exact exercise before when you introduce something new, but it also feeds off of things they've done before.
Exactly.
So
there's a familiarity in terms of their muscle movement.
And then then they'll learn that choreography of that newer exercise, and then they're like, oh wait,
I did that over there, but differently. Yeah. And then it's also like you can say, oh, remember when we did elephant? Here we are now, but now we're da-da-da-da. And you're like, oh, yeah.
So then it helps them learn it more because they know that other exercise. And you're like, yeah, similarly here, we'll take that same idea and add to it in a different way or turn it around or whatever. So you can really, with repetition and adding layers of different things, you really can do so much.
They're never going to get bored.
Yeah.
But I think giving that client that time to learn the choreography without jumping in is really key, because we want to see how they're moving. We want to see how they figure things out. We want to see what they're capable of.
Yeah. And you mean like without jumping in and like adding so many corrections?
Yeah. that they stop moving, or adding the corrections in a way that maybe their body isn't built or made or able to do.
Yeah. And again, it has to be about that person.
Yeah. Not what you want that person to do.
Yeah.
Like, I know when you're a new teacher, it's like, you remember this, like the first time you're in a studio with teachers that are more seasoned than you, and you get a new client, and then the new client is like, it's messy, it's whatever, and I remember going, oh, they're going to think I'm such a bad teacher because my client can't, you know what I mean? But it's like, it is what it is. They're learning, just like when we were practicing to be teachers and doing our hours, we have to learn.
You have to learn. And so, and the client has to learn. They need that space to learn. It can be messy. It can be sloppy. They can be doing things wrong. A shoulder can lift here or there, whatever.
As long as they're safe, we're good.
They're safe. You're giving that gentle guidance. They're learning, and you move.
And we have to explore with them. We have to explore with the client. We can't, dictate to the client.
Yeah. And that makes me think of, we were talking about earlier about certain types of sequence planning.
We were talking about, blocks of exercises or, what was the
blocks
other thing?
And then, level...
Oh, yeah, beginner, intermediate, advanced, labeling exercises.
Labeling, yeah. And it makes me think about that because if you have a very, for me, that type of style of class session planning doesn't work because it feels very limiting. And it's not about that client. It's about what this pre-designed type of session is. And so if you say these exercises are beginner, these are intermediate, these are advanced, and or if you're saying this is block,
this is for this type of person,
block,
this is for this, this is for that.
And so if this person can't do this next exercise,
They can't progress to this.
progress. And like we were saying before, maybe they're never going to do that one exercise. So are you never going to progress them in the next block or the next level?
Yeah.
And so I personally prefer to teach based on what I'm seeing this person doing.
And what they need.
Maybe
and what they
can do this exercise when this other person who's way more advanced can't do that one or whatever.
Yeah, and this just hit me as you said. It's like, what about, because if you're sticking to that, this being intermediate, beginner, whatever, or the block system, and because I love to do this with clients, it's like, you want to show them how they've progressed and where they can go and what we can build on. So I love to take people at some point to the Cadillac and just see if they can, like, I call it like a prep, to see if they could like do the inversions and stuff. Not that I think they're going to do them. Maybe they're not.
They get that arm connection.
But just to get that connection. But that's gearing up to what some would say, oh, well, that's blah, blah, blah advanced, so they can't do that because they're here. But we're just saying, can you like pull your knees in and hold yourself here for a moment?
Find the tuck.
And they have the best time. Because if they do it, they're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And then if they don't, it's like, oh, we have something to gear towards, to work towards. So I think exploring like that, because that takes that away.
Yeah. And I love just that feeling of like excitement about an exercise. And that's the other thing. Like you can break exercises down. So even
you don't have to flip over upside down.
You don't have to go do an inversion immediately. I mean, or ever.
Or ever.
You can just do the arm connection.
Yeah.
And you can then leave it there and then do it later. And so the foundational work, the repetition, the beginning of an exercise, or just the prep for an exercise can be huge.
It can be a huge light bulb moment for the client. And they can also see how they've progressed or see the connections that they've made, where if we have them, you're only able to do beginner exercises.
Right. That's not very inspiring.
It's not very nice. It's not very nice.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of like we talked about, you can have a client that's never done Pilates before, no idea. They come in and they're totally capable of doing a so-called advanced exercise.
Right. They can. Yeah. I've seen it. Some of my, young dancers can do these, quote, advanced exercises.
Yep.
Now, do they have the foundations and the understanding? And
some do.
Some.
Yeah.
Some don't, even though they can. And so it's just so specific to that person.
Yeah. And as the teacher, that's what you're looking for. Is what is this client capable, and should we try this, and can we, and see what they do with the choreography. So I think when you're planning your session for your client, it's like looking at all the avenues you could go down.
Yeah. And I think sometimes because there are so many different avenues and so many approaches, that probably is what's overwhelming for a lot of teachers, where they're like, I don't know anything, or I don't know where to start. And so for me, coming from a dance background, like I always think of like the arc of a class as like, okay, you're going to start somebody with more of a warming up sort of movement, whether that's some mat work, hundreds, or footwork on the reformer. It's going to be more of that like foundational movement to get the body and mind centered and going. And then you kind of ramp it up a bit. You see how they're moving. Maybe you have a peak moment of the challenge point or whatever, and then kind of reassess, like you like to say, see how their body has changed, and then kind of ramp it back down.
Yeah.
And that's a general arc, and that's a not so planned class plan.
Yeah, and it's the same thing for me because I teach traditionally, so I feel like that first half hour for me is already kind of planned in terms of, like you said, it's like starting either on the mat or the reformer, one to the other, and then seeing where they are, and then, going into that work of what does this body need, what am I seeing, and then either a challenge point or seeing how it all came together.
Yeah.
And if you think about teaching like we're talking about, it's not so overwhelming.
Right. And that's what I love about the traditional work, because if you are overwhelmed, you can always go back to that traditional sequencing and like pick a chunk of mat work and just do a handful of those exercises in order.
And just the foundation of it.
Yeah. And that can really simplify things. If you're like, okay, we do hundreds, then and just move from that. That's a good chunk right there. Not that you have to do everything, but you maybe
you do the full amount.
Every single time.
Every single one.
But you pick the ones that make sense for that person on that day. And that can sometimes take some of the like fear and uncertainty out of it. Like there is sequencing that you can pull from.
Well, and it also goes into that, because I know you, even though, like you said, how you teach, it's like you still are having that, oh, God, I knew it would happen.
You knew.
I knew my brain would go today. But, yeah, that repetition in terms of they're doing, like you said, when they come in, it's this stuff, da-da-da-da, and then seeing kind of where they
where
go.
It goes. Yeah.
Which, if you're, like, scrambling to think, oh, what am I going to do with them today? I don't know. Did we able to start here? And da-da.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of pressure.
Yeah. It's exhausting.
It's exhausting.
And different people like to teach in different ways. And if there's certain sequences that make sense to you as a teacher, and then that's your kind of outline, and then you adjust it per person.
Per person. Because I think that's the key thing. Like we've always said, you're teaching to that person in front of you. And what was it we were saying about the exercise? It's kind of like we're not teaching them to fit the exercise.
Yeah.
We're teaching the exercise to fit where they
the client. Yeah. So we're like, we're letting the client, seeing how the client's moving, how their body's responding, and modifying the exercise to what they need or how they can do it.
Yeah.
We don't need to fit them into
that
this
exercise.
like pre-cut, exercise.
Yeah. Because I think in we were talking about social media, because you know how we feel about social media. So we were talking about social media and how it seems like a lot of it is all about how things have to look a certain way. Yeah. And it's this way, and that like really heavy hands-on where you're stopping people from moving, which is a pet peeve of mine. Yeah. Because I want my clients to move and I just want to guide them. So I feel like that takes away a lot of what we're talking about when we're building a session. Mm-hmm. It's because it's the teacher thinking the client has to do it this way. Yeah. And if not, then it's not right.
Yep. And that
your
again,
face. If only you could see her face.
And that goes back to the teacher putting themselves into the session
equation
too much, where it's like, oh, the client can't do it in this way. They need me, so I have to be hands-on or stop them or
push
no,
them.
or whereas we really, and we've said this before, we really want the client to be able to be independent, know how to move, learning how to adjust themselves, but we're there for guidance. Yeah. And they want to come in for their sessions. Yeah.
And the bottom line is we can't fix someone's hip. We can't fix someone's shoulder. We can't fix their scoliosis. We can't fix whatever it is, right? But we can help them move in a movement pattern that works for them in the outside world.
Yeah. Things that will be beneficial
in their everyday movement. Because they're not going out on the sidewalk, like we said, look at my teaser. I'm doing a teaser in the middle of the sidewalk. No.
Unless you're taking photos for your teacher.
Unless you're a teacher and then you're traveling and you're like, I got to get my teaser
picture. But yeah, we're guiding people in our sessions to help their bodies be more mobile and stronger and more capable, and helping them feel more vibrant and vital. And, that's why we're teaching them. Mm-hmm. So we don't need to perfect that teaser. We're teaching them how to flow through the movement and control and coordination that they will then go out and use in different ways.
Because it's kind of like if you we don't want to get too deep in the weeds, but just like to break the teaser down. What are these movements we're asking this client to do that entail a teaser? If you break it down, there's a lot of everyday movements in there. Mm-hmm. They're not doing a teaser.
Right.
But there's everyday movements.
Reaching, flexing,
then into extension. Yeah. Lifting the legs, getting that work.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think the bottom line is session planning. There's no one answer, which is part of what makes it frustrating. But it really depends on the client.
It's really about the client.
It is all about the client. Of course, you want it to be like a well-balanced session. You don't want to have 8,000 extensions or only flexion.
He said, The spine should move in all directions as long as it's not, contraindicated for the client. But yeah, we want to see them move in all these different orientations to gravity and spring and the spine doing all these different things.
Yeah. So it's just about that client and getting them moving.
And then, oh my gosh, we could just keep going because I don't feel like we touched on the long-term client, but with a long-term client, it's kind of the same things, right? Mm-hmm. Just going back to foundations, finding a new focus.
Yeah. It's all the same thing.
It's all the same thing because you're still meeting them where they are that day.
Yeah, what they need that day.
Challenging them.
Challenge points, still building off of those foundations. And maybe after they've learned all the choreography, they've been with you for a long time, you're coming back to the foundations at some point and re-evaluating.
Because it's going to be different for them because their thought process has changed from when they were a beginner learning all these things. Yeah. Now it's like, oh, they see all the connections and they see it as a whole and they're like, oh, I understand this now.
Yeah, they see how it all connects all of it.
Yeah. Oh, who's our sponsor?
Oh, yes. Well... Our sponsor is
the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel or Roosevelt Hollywood Hotel. We don't know. Anyway, it's like Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel. Look it up. It's got a huge history. Yeah. Huge history. And so we're doing our annual little summer work day.
Yep.
At the pool.
Our pool work day.
Our pool work day.
Actually, a lot of work done.
Yes. So we chose that hotel this year, and we're super excited. Mm-hmm. And we're revamping our website, and we're planning our fall workshop.
Yep.
I don't think we haven't really picked our workshop, or if we do, I don't remember. It's been one of those. I know. So anyway, that was it. Building our sessions.
Yeah. Think about your client.
Yep. Take the ego out of it. It's all about them.
That it is.
Okay, well, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.